Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone has a fantastic day as we go today to our third episode of the virtual PSOJ ROADMAP to Jamaica 2.0 series. I'm Nicola Madden-Greig, Group Director of Marketing and Sales for the Courtleigh Hospitality Group and past President of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association. And I will be moderating today's conversation. So we hope you'll be engaged. And just before we start, a couple of housekeeping matters. Obviously, we're going to have the presentations and then we'll have the Q&A session. And I'm just asking persons to please pay attention to our etiquette for the meeting on screen. And let's give you a chance to read through that. But letting you know that you'll have an opportunity to speak and ask questions at the end, and just use the raise hand button and you will be facilitated. Okay, so just starting out with a little background behind the Conversation series, which is an initiative that seeks to engage local and international leaders on very important topics related to boosting private sector investment and driving economic growth in Jamaica as an important focus area for the PSOJ. These conversations are so much more important now as we battle the onslaught of this pandemic, which has been quite challenging. And we look forward to develop a roadmap of recovery for Jamaica. We would like to recognize and thank our title sponsor for the series, the JMMB Group, as well as the Inter-American Development Bank, both of whom have been key supporters of the efforts to build a strong private sector partnership and economy. In our first conversation in the series held in early November, moderated by Jeffrey Hall, co-chair of the PSOJ Economic Policy Committee, we spoke about tourism recovery with representatives from American Airlines, Carnival Cruise Lines, and Montego Bay Airports Limited. It was a very insightful episode, and we encourage you to visit the PSOJ YouTube channel if you haven't seen it as yet to get a recap on that conversation. For today, we'll be revisiting the topic of tourism and turning the focus on the outlook for 2021. We will be hearing the perspectives of some major players in the local and attraction sector. But before we go into that, I just wanted to give a little bit of a recap of where we're coming from. So 2019 was a really fantastic year for Jamaica tourism, and we saw 13 consecutive quarters of growth all the way back from 2016. We welcomed 4.4 million visitors to the island, which was a record year for us. It could not have been better. Tourism continues to produce a great amount of Jamaica's GDP, and we looked at earning in 2019 $3.64 billion from tourism. The industry hires about 120,000 workers directly, and in total about 350,000 workers indirectly. We continue to see linkages in tourism deepen, and it is Jamaica's, or was Jamaica's largest foreign exchange earner, contributing approximately 48.2% to foreign exchange earnings in 2019. So as you can see, we were looking forward to an even more robust 2020. And we started out looking forward to having growth in the regions of 5.2% with an expected 4.5 million arrivals by the end of the year. And then we had COVID. So as you know, that has taken tourism off track, and we saw the worldwide shutdown of international travel and the impact that this has had on not only Jamaica's economy, but on the world economy. So in today's session, we will be looking at how we can move forward and look forward to how we can recover our industry. This afternoon, we'll get perspectives on the current challenges and opportunities, as well as we will discuss the projected timelines for the return to normalcy in the industry. We have with us a very distinguished panel, and I'm just going to introduce them so you can get them a first-hand view of how the conversation would go. And I'm going to start with Adam Stewart. Adam is the Deputy Chairman of Sandals Resorts International, one of the world's most recognized hospitality brands and the Caribbean leading luxury all-inclusive resort company. Adam also sits as the Chairman of the Tourism Linkages Council and is the founder of Island Roots Caribbean Adventures. We are also joined with John Byles, Executive Director of Chukka Adventures. Chukka Adventures offers over 60 nature adventure experience to its guests in Jamaica, Belize, Turks and Caicos, the Dominican Republic, and Barbados. John is also our new Deputy Chairman of the Jamaica Tourist Board. We also have with us Julian Mair, JMMB's Group Chief Investment Strategist and a contributor to the National COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force. Julian is also Chairman of the Jamaica Stock Exchange and Vice President of the Jamaica Security Dealers Association. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Nick's colleagues.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, welcome. So we're going to get this started in the next hour or so, and then we will go into the discussion segment. So I'm going to start off by asking some key questions and ask each of you to share your perspective on the level of engagement and impact of tourism in Jamaica's economy prior to COVID-19. I gave some rough statistics that took us through where we were in terms of our stopover arrivals, but I would just ask you gentlemen, Adam and John in particular, to give more of the industry perspective in terms of what tourism pre-COVID really did in terms of impacting the Jamaica's economy, both direct and indirectly. Adam, I'm going to start out with you.
Sure. Afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I think, I see tourism through the lens of it being an ecosystem. For years, we've had conversations and deliberations about the economic impact of tourism. I think if nothing else, COVID brought that straight into focus as to its true impact. So, we know that we count arrivals in a tourism bucket. We know that we put taxis and the services at the airport in the transportation bucket. The airport in and of itself is in the transportation bucket. Agriculture sits in agriculture, whether it's the egg farmer or the fruit supplier. Entertainers that come into our hotels sit in Babsy Grange's ministry. And I could just keep going on, right? So there's always this disaggregation between what is directly employed, the 120,000 personnel circa, vis-a-vis the 350,000 persons in total. As a result, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's oil and gas, whether it is the telcos, just about every single industry is touched by tourism. So tourism is in effect this $4 billion machine that exists in Jamaica. And COVID and the reality of COVID, in effect, this is the first time in 70 years that the global hospitality industry has been shut down and the global airline industry, more importantly, has been shut down. So, this pandemic is worse for hospitality, worse worldwide than, the Gulf War, the last economic downturn, and 9/11 combined. We've never seen a situation in hospitality globally where the entire industry was brought to its knees for matters larger than anything that we can solve. Much bigger than Sandals Resorts as a private company, much bigger than Jamaica as a nation, much bigger than, in fact, the Caribbean. This was a global pandemic. So the knock-on effect that took place there, employment being just the beginning, I think has been felt by all. But I think the way to think of it is just this big, and we'll talk further about it, this big ecosystem that connects just about every industry in our day-to-day life.
Yes, that's definitely true. I mean, we've definitely seen the decline both in the April to June quarter and, of course, the July to September quarter, but we'll get into those figures in a little bit. John, let's get your initial feedback.
Well, I mean, I couldn't frame it better than how Adam has framed it a while ago. The industry is truly integrated into the very fabric of all the other industries. And if there's anything we've learned through this period of time is how much coordination is required cross-ministerially, as well as the industry players. The pain that has been felt because you were looking at for a couple of months an absolute shutdown of tourism, and then we saw some semblance of the stayover coming back, but the cruise side is still not up. We'll discuss some of those points later, but you're talking many of the linkages, many of the operators that just have absolutely no income coming in from those areas. And some of that I would even question if we have had historically the way to measure the true impact of some of that spend when, 5,000 or 10,000 cruise ship passengers come to a country, and the income that's injected to the drivers, to the small restaurants, bars, craft, etc., that are out there.
Yes, I mean, the UNTAD report that was published earlier this year looked at Jamaica as being one of the economies that would be most severely impacted by, tourism's downturn. And that's because we have been actually quite stellar in deepening the linkages. And the WTCC has, reported that we have moved our contribution up, significantly to, in the $4 out of 4 cents out of every dollar. So it's very important in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the knock-on effects of tourism. So I would say that we will move ahead and look at some other things. So looking at that now, I would say, looking at the perspective for the potential outlook, we know what has happened and we know where we are currently. But gentlemen, where do you see tourism going, let's say in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year? And how do you see us recovering in this new environment?
Nick, if I can, so I think the thing to do is to bring it down to a personal level. Many of you on this call, I know, many of you on this call, I see you on airlines, in travels. When you're going places, you're visiting family and friends, you're doing the things that you love. You're going to see shows for work. Travel is often thought about as a luxury when we talk about travel, and particularly when we're Jamaicans, because we're, in many ways a leisure destination. But travel globally is no longer a luxury. For our grandparents' generation and those who flew on Pan Am, in those days, flying was a luxury when 50 million people a year used to fly, and it was a huge privilege. Today, travel is a part of the thread of our society. It's like getting on a bus for much of the world. Marriott International owns 7,000 hotels. 6,700 of those hotels are business hotels, meaning the people that stay in their rooms are in their rooms because they're doing something towards their livelihood or their careers. So I think to start this thing is every one of us have been displaced by not being able to go somewhere for some future trip that we were looking forward to. And as a result, something feels like it's been taken away from us. So that feeling that you have the world over has it, because the world over travels. And certainly Jamaica has been the darling of the Americas, an hour and a half south, English speaking, very safe, albeit we have our crime issues. Crime and harm against visitors are literally non-existent. And you have the rhythm and soul of Jamaica being the heartbeat of the world, as we brand it at the JTB. So that, with that in mind, and understanding that Europe is not so much a feature right now for global travel, with the lockdowns, the cruise industry is an enormous industry and they're still under a no-sail order. South Africa reopened with very vague and gray, it's their summer now, rules, and it's long-haul travel. People are tending to stay closer to home, shorter travel. There are not many places to go that are warm right now. And, the parks of the United States of America kicked in, and they did well in, meaning not the Universal Studios and that lot, but the Yellowstone National Parks, Montana, etc. So that being said, we have a real opportunity. But the reality is that the world is still totally polarized. Half of the world is afraid to travel, and half of the world wants to get out there. So the funnel of business that we're tapping into is much smaller. Canada is not moving yet. We have sanctions and restrictions against much of Europe. The UK is in and out of the bubble. So it means you're down to the United States and half of the United States. And as a result, we're trending up. We're going to have a pretty decent December. January, with the change of power in the United States, is holding back booking pace. It's a very normal thing. February looks better. March looks a little better, but we're probably going to end up at about 40-50% below where we were 2019. So 2021, certainly Q1
as a
into
full
Q2.
Year. Yes.
As a full year. 2021 looks like a recovery year. My own view is that 2022 is going to be gangbusters.
Because we're closing out 2020 somewhere about 75 to 80% behind 19. So definitely being able to recover in 2021 to be 50% of 19 would be phenomenal. I mean, not what we're accustomed to, but definitely better than 2020.
Grateful.
So, John, you want to give a little bit of your perspective? And Julian, I haven't forgotten you. I'm going to pull you into the conversation right now. So be prepared for me. John?
Yeah, so we, from just looking at what the outlook and looking at it from the cruise side, they have in block put forward a suspension to February, and then they have some restrictions because they're going to be allowed to open, or they have been allowed to open by the CDC with test basis. First of all, they're supposed to have a cruise to nowhere. Then they're supposed to only go to private islands, and they're going to be micro managed right through that entire period. So, just looking at it, it would look like it may be somewhere in April, if all things go well, that we'll be looking that they may be starting to come to Jamaica. But within that, we also, cruises are really pushing the envelope because of the requirement to have some level of harmonization among more than one country. They don't sail to one itinerary, to one destination. So the requirement to have an itinerary where you have the protocols harmonized is a critical, is going to play a critical role. So, I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, but it would look like, the cruise will be somewhere between April and early summer.
So that's looking at, the next 6 months. Where do you see us in, say, 12 months time in terms of the outlook? Do we feel that we'll be back at full kilt, or do we still see that we'll be in recovery phase?
I think, Nicola, that I think Q1 is going to be difficult for those of you not in hospitality. January, February, March is where hospitality in the leisure space usually has its best 3 months of the year financially. So we are going to lose the profitable months of the year. Q2, and much of what we're describing here is tied to the vaccine and the distribution of the vaccine. So for those who want to take the vaccine, there's a tremendous amount of confidence coming that the vaccine is now been FDA approved and is being distributed, and that confidence level is building. So as the passage of time passes, you're going to see more and more consumers. The pent-up demand is without a shadow of a doubt there. It's whether or not travel right now is a choice. So it's whether or not people feel safe to be able to travel and to keep, this is personal. This is about your individual self and your individual family, and whether or not they feel they can travel. So it is my own view that by the time we get to Q3 and Q4, September, October, back to school, the two softest months for the year in travel, always, worldwide. Kids go back to school, people have to pay for it. But I believe as we start to look towards Thanksgiving 2021, that we're going to have a run here for hospitality. And I think Jamaica, because of its proximity, because of how well, irrespective of the fact that we're in community spread, but just how well we've managed our own reputation in Jamaica and the Caribbean at large. The Caribbean at large is the world's most tourism-dependent region anywhere. So I think the Caribbean stands to gain strongly, and the Northern Caribbean and Jamaica is about as cool of a destination as you can go to. I think we'll have a very strong recovery towards the back end of the year, and certainly into winter 2022.
Well, you raised a point, Adam, in terms of the financial implications. As you know, we since opening in June, both hotels, attractions, all the tourism entities pretty much have been in what we call loss mitigation, because we're not at profit. Typically an all-inclusive to make to hit break-even and profit, we're looking at 65 up to even 70-80% occupancy. And we know that I would say all hotels in Jamaica are nowhere near those occupancies at the moment. So we continue the loss mitigation strategies. And looking at that, I would want to bring in Julian now to kind of walk us through his perspective on the impact of COVID and how that has really impacted financial sector and the loan portfolios that are out there, and how that also it has impacted the foreign exchange market and other other elements that have to deal with what tourism would have normally provided to the Jamaican economy. So Julian, if you want to join us and just take us through that.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Nicola. I guess this is a appropriate time for you to bring me in after you've spoken with the two experts in the field of attractions and one of our largest hoteliers. They, of course, would know better than I as to what we can anticipate for the next few months and certainly the year to come. Nothing about what was said appears surprising. I guess I would only add that probably we see some patterns this year that may not be consistent with the years gone by, just simply because of that pent-up demand. It may show itself as demand showing up in pockets that we wouldn't have anticipated. Typically, the business traveler with whom I would be very familiar, certainly within the financial sector, my colleagues can't, justification for jumping on a plane and going on travel right now is hard to find. But beyond that, from an institutional perspective, a lot of them are under stop travel orders. Institutionally, they will not be allowed to travel on behalf of the firm during the next few months. So of course, as the vaccine becomes more available and people, of course, get to the benefit of that, we hope to see that relax as soon as possible. The world of banking and global banking, which a lot of our international travel is related to, whether it is supporting transactions with local companies or the countries itself. A lot of that is still work that needs to be done. And in times of COVID, challenges are greater than they had been before. And therefore, the need for banking services and services of general financial solutions is at an all-time high. So the requirements, the need for people to actually make some of these trips and get there certainly still exists, and we'd anticipate to see as soon as the borders as soon as their internal protocols allow them to travel, that we'll be seeing some of those business travelers get back on the ground to take advantage of the opportunities that exist and take care of the work that they've already been engaged in executing. With regards to the loan portfolio question, that's really an individual entity discussion. And I would say that there is no clear market information at this point in time as to exactly how those loan portfolios are performing for each of the individual entities or in aggregate for the sector. But what we can share is high-level data, which is that the local banking sector would have exposure to the tourism sector as one of the largest export sector of the country, would have exposure that is meaningful. And on the other side of that, suppliers would have relationships and a lot of their products would be sold into the tourism sector as part of linkages. Would also have significant relationships with the banks. If we were to use broad strokes to get to a number, we might say in total the exposure of the sector might be close to maybe close to US $1 billion. There are different levels of operators, and I think what Adam pointed to at the start is that players in the tourism sector pop up all over the place when we start to look at the different service industries within the country, and therefore this is spread across a broad grouping of entities and sectors, a number of which have been able to pivot and utilize the skill sets that would typically have been targeted to distribution strictly into the tourism sector or primarily in the tourism sector to become a bit more relevant to the local consumers. So at this point, from what data we do have, we are seeing that a number of the related entities and related industries are showing some level of resilience, but I wouldn't want to use a broad stroke and say that is the case for all. There are a number of specific entities and industries which are related to the tourism sector that certainly are very far from being okay. At this point, we know, of course, that the banking sector being adequately capitalized, and certainly, Jamaica we're not new to challenges. So the discussions of bankers with the various entrepreneurs that they would have relationships with and various businesses that they would have relationships with are very straightforward. We understand challenges and we understand that they do occur. Certainly, everybody within the sector would have gone through at least one.
So there's been some flexibility, obviously, Julian, that Bank of Jamaica has given to the bankers. I don't know if you want to share a little bit of that to, persons listening to see how we've been able to manage, because obviously Jamaica in the past has come to similar economic challenges, and the path taken has been very different from the path that's being taken now, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, the challenges we'd have had before would have been a bit more broad-based. It wouldn't have been related to any particular sector. It would have been a result of high interest rate policies and so forth. But generally, it would come back to the same outcome, which is that there are borrowers who would have an inability to pay. At this point, we have, I guess, a greater level of comfort and confidence that the security that backs these loans is adequate, and therefore the ability to adjust during these challenging times is something that can be afforded to the sector and to the individual players. The Bank of Jamaica kind of gave a broader brush. They gave a leeway for not only for the tourism sector, but generally for the banking sector to look at entities that would have been impacted by COVID, and would have allowed for the banks to treat with those facilities in a specific way, which would not have, which would have allowed for some relief to the entities themselves from the debt burden that would have occurred. That kind of expires, I believe, this month. But COVID continues, and discussions with a proactive central bank continue.
Excellent. So, John, I don't know if you want to make any comments on this particular question before we move on to another aspect of our conversation today.
Well, I would love to, well, first of all, just thank, the financial sector for what work is being done to support the entities. But if you would allow me, I'd like to go back to the outlook and just speak to a couple of points that I feel I could that could add to the discussion. I personally feel optimistic about the outlook. I know it's a time delay issue. We're probably, if we were to be ultra conservative, we're probably talking about the summer the summer of 21 before we start to really see some level of impact. But Jamaica right now is enjoying incredible airlift, and the airlift is counting that much more because of the fact that people really don't want connecting flights. So the fact that we have all these gateways, we are, and to Adam's point, being the close proximity, and the fact that there is so much pent up demand for travel. So people can get to Jamaica hour and a half, 2 hours, they can get here. And the reality is, from where I'm sitting, the slate has been wiped clean. A lot of the pain points that people used to even question about traveling and even Jamaica before with some of the issues, they've been wiped clean. I mean, there's and what's really coming out is the reality that, by really packaging what we offer as a destination, we stand out. The people, the food, the nature adventure. You have more purposeful travel to Jamaica than almost any other destination that I can think of in the Caribbean. And, being in quite different countries, we really have a strategic advantage.
Correct.
And so the question would be, whether it be by cruise or by airlift, We have the airlift, and by cruise, they have the drive to ports that make this part of a sweet spot. So yes, the travel may overall globally contract and take a while longer to come back. But I truly believe that, that funnel, we are going to get a disproportionate amount of that business once things start to flow again.
Open again. I mean, we recently looked at the WTCC recovery roadmap that they have, and they pointed out that adventure travel is one of the most search terms now, and that seems to be where a lot of the recovery is happening. And Jamaica, of course, well poised to get some of that business, even more so with the assets that we have on the ground. So let's look at that a little bit further and say, if I was to ask all three of you to give us 2 or 3 of the most essential elements for this roadmap of recovery for tourism in Jamaica, would you just point out what you think we need to do in the short and medium term to really turn around this recovery process? Besides the natural assets that we have pointed out that we have, is there anything else we need to look at from both a policy point of view or a marketing perspective that would drive this recovery even more so than we are already thinking that we should have? So Adam, do you want to start off with marketing and looking at that, and then we'll go back?
I mean, absolutely. So I think, right, so every day the WHO is saying something new, the Pan American Health Organization, the CDC, they keep putting out new information, the evolution of the scientific and technological side of the vaccines. And as a result, our local ministries of health, and we must recognize that the ecosystem that we describe internally of Jamaica, there is an ecosystem externally. Travel agents, tour operators, tour companies, airlines, all of the connectivity that makes this thing possible. Most all companies are running some element of skeleton crew. The airlines have had dramatic layoffs. The travel distribution companies have had dramatic layoffs, obviously due to demand, and everyone is hoping for not just the demand to pick up, but people to put their credit cards down and to book. The net result of that is that consumers are somewhat confused on the regulations. What is it today? What's been changed? And we actually in Jamaica had a bit of a breakthrough, because every sort of week or 10 days, our government viewed it as being proactive by just having constant little changes to policy here and there. And we Nicola, myself, the GHD, John, etc., agitated for subject to any catastrophic outbreak in the country, no changes until April 1st to take us through the winter season, which they agreed to, which was a great breakthrough, because what we were being told by our travel trade partners were we're not really sure what's going on in Jamaica, which takes us right to the point of, gold at half price that no one knows about has no value to anyone. So it comes down to the marketing, right? So John is describing the fact that Jamaica has the mountains, the rivers, and the beaches. There are very few islands in the Caribbean that offer the music, the soul, the rhythm, the gastronomic experience, and all of the beauty. I mean, Mexico is a flat pancake. It's scrubland. They don't have what we have, and we know that.
And most importantly, the people. Yeah.
That's our greatest asset, right? That's what I mean by the soul of Jamaica, the people of Jamaica. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do now is literally, and what the JTB is responding to, is to literally get ourselves back onto national television and through digital campaigns to say, Jamaica, we're open. We are welcoming you, because people are not quite sure who is doing what where in the world. And it's not until you try and actually travel that you realize how complicated it is. The airlines are adopting basically a repository called Verifly, which it's like a membership club almost, or like a loyalty club. Mm-hmm. You put your information in there wherever you're looking to go. It automatically grabs the protocols and the requirements of that destination and tells you what you need to do, whether it's a 72-hour PCR test or a 7-day or a 10-day, or if there's any particular vaccines or anything that are needed, because information is moving differently. And to John's point about the cruise lines, every government is doing it their own way to show their sovereign strength, which in effect makes it hard for the consumer. So what we're seeing is the obvious. We're seeing RV sales in America being through the roof. We're seeing people staycationing more. We're seeing the United States of America spending more money on their, visit Florida, go Montana. You're seeing very obvious, right? People are trying to get their own citizens to staycation. No different than my friend Kyle Mays online, who has done one of the most outstanding jobs. Everybody in Jamaica stayed at Jamaica recently.
Adam, you've gone mute.
Yeah, I think you touched your mute button there.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. No, so I think what we have to do right now is we have to be heavy on the marketing. We have to front load our marketing budget. All of what I'm describing, we've been in dialogue with the Jamaica Tourist Board. I'm not worried about Q3 and Q4. I'm not even worried about Q2. Let's just worry about January, February, and March, and it'll be a whole new world by then. And Jamaica's got a lot going for it, and we need to tell the world that we need them here.
Yes, that's true. I mean, definitely getting the word out and making sure persons can clearly see how easy it is to travel and what the requirements are. There's still a little bit of confusion, and we've worked very in tandem with the JTB to push that out. John, I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit of your perspective, and then Julian, I'll give you a chance to jump in on this question as well.
Well, I don't know what more there is to add to that.
Well, is there any policies, anything along those lines that you think we haven't been doing yet, or we should focus on a little bit more?
So what I would say is that coming out of this, I had, in my experience in the industry, I've never seen the players from all levels and industries really pull together the way we have recently.
True.
Through this period, and it has been outstanding. It's both private and public sector, and the collective brain power has been incredible. What I would say is that right now, the most important thing I see is putting that now into execution and ensuring that the policies that we have as a country are in a line with where we see these opportunities now going forward. And from that, on that same point, there's some things that are, have been suggested to be put into policy. Some of these things amendments are sitting down that need to be actually finalized. Our JTB Act is one of them. And what we should be doing now as far as policy is using this same accelerated alignment that is taking place now and get these things through. Because I can tell you, I never knew laws could be changed in 1 week. I never knew that policies could be adjusted the way they have been. And what used to be, fast in a year is running out of time in 2 weeks. So
we need a version of the disaster risk management for the Growth Act.
Well, Nicola, I mean, John, I'd say that the work that occurred, in the early stages of our 2012 IMF agreement, which were mainly around, structural reform, our ability to change laws, our ability to adjust some of the mechanisms and how they work together. That built some serious muscles in Jamaica with regard to being able to change policy, built amend laws. And, this COVID crisis has hit Jamaica at a time when where we've developed those muscles. And we certainly have built on the muscles that we had before to come together and work harmoniously across industries. This situation with COVID, I think, brings, of course, everybody's focus on tourism, and nobody can ignore its importance. $4+ billion, Adam spoke to the number of US dollars that comes into our economy, a lot of it finding its way to conversion and supporting, a lot of what, the average Jamaican has to deal with on a daily basis, whether it is that they're buying sardines that are imported or a motor vehicle, of course, also imported. If you look right across the spectrum, look on your plate on any given day, imports are a big part of our life. And certainly the foreign exchange to ensure that life is not too severely disrupted, is very important to the overall stability of the economy and how people feel about their quality of life. So getting the attention of all the sectors, I think for sure, this would naturally occur, and it has occurred. When I think about recovery and what's required, I can't add anything to what Adam would have said. He understands how to drive the industry best, and John similarly. From the perspective of the financial sector, we of course recognize that tourism plays a massive role, but it could even be more impactful to the economy. And there are a few things that were done, one of which was championed by the PSOJ. In the early days when everybody was on lockdown, I mean real lockdown, where curfews were really impacting people's ability to go and get food, and certainly always impacting their ability to earn as these industries have been impacted. But one of the things that the PSOJ had done in collaboration with the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the government was to do a food drive where it was looking to go and create linkages between the farmers who we had video of farms where product which was initially targeted at the tourism industry, that these products, it didn't make sense for these farmers to reap it. They would leave it and let it just rot on the field because they didn't have a market for the product. These are critical components to the economy that we can't afford to atrophy. These are critical components that if we continue with the initiatives such as that, we could strengthen during this period so that we are putting the economy in a better position to prove itself as a viable alternative to the tourism dollar currently spent on imports. This is part of what I would say a lot of Jamaicans would be interested in. This is where this discussion about, does tourism, we see the tourism numbers flying every year. And the question is, how much does it really help us individuals as a country, seeing as we have seen anemic GDP growth? This is where I believe, as much as COVID is certainly wreaking havoc through the sector as it has throughout the sector across the globe, this is one of these moments, I believe, where the collective might of the Jamaican economy and all of its components working together to go and strengthen linkages with the tourism sector as we work hand in hand to protect this industry that we all are invested in. This is one of these that on the outside, as an outcome of this activity, and of this period would be the gem. If we walk away with a greater level of linkages between the tourism sector and the economy overall, I believe that we walk away with something that would have made the sacrifice of this time, not the sacrifice chosen, but the sacrifice of this time really worth it.
Well, to that point, Julian, I think, there's a lot of conversation about pivoting away from tourism because of the impact that we have, the industry has had to suffer. Because of course we are an export-driven industry and with the lockdowns and so on. But what is important to point out is how resilient tourism is, and every shock that tourism has had over the years, we have rebounded well and rebounded fast. And to your point, it's important that we not only look at the opportunities now that we can get from the Jamaican tourism sector, but it's a time for manufacturers or agricultural industry to look at what sort of reset and relationships that can be built with the tourism industry, not only in the Caribbean, but also internationally, because now all those supply chains have been disrupted, and we have an opportunity not only to have linkages with the local industry, but also to look at the regional and international industry as we all start to recover. So there are opportunities there as well. So I agree with you on that point. So
there was an exercise. There was a trip made a few years ago by our Prime Minister talking to the Northern Caribbean partners or Northern Caribbean players in the tourism space. And in one of the meetings that was held in Dominican Republic, the discussion occurred with the local farmers and the head of those associations. representing a few thousand farmers. And it was very interesting that they spoke about where they started from, where 25% thereabouts of the consumption of the tourism sector came from local manufacturers or service providers, to where they are now, where it's somewhere in the 80+% region. And this now goes into your high value items such as your marbles and all the rest of those in manufacturing, but all the way through the entire supply chain. So by having a deliberate focus on it, what they've also done, of course, by having, if not guaranteed demand, but demand that is very interested in supporting the local industry. Build local industry of scale that can definitely prove itself to be import substitutors for the economy as a whole. So in a moment like this, where tourism falls off a bit, we would want to see the counterbalance to that reduction in USD earnings to be a reduction or an increase in import substitution, where those same suppliers are selling into the local market, and therefore the demand for US dollars would have fallen off at a pace that would also have, hedged the impact on the economy.
Okay, we're coming up close to the Q&A section. So I just want Adam, as chair of the Linkages Council, since we're on the topic, how do you see these new opportunities that in the Jamaican industry, how we could focus on increased value, working with other industries to ensure that the recovery of the Jamaican economy using tourism as the ongoing catalyst? And then I have one last question for the three of you before we move into the Q&A. Adam?
So I would break it, and for Nicola, for transparency, Nicola is also on the Linkages Council with me, and we have a lot of fun. She's the chairperson for the gastronomic vertical. So to pull off of what Julian just said, I think Jamaica needs to do, some years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were looking for employment when we were luring foreign investment. We are so beyond that today. Just before COVID hit, I believe unemployment in Jamaica was down at 7.6%, right? First time in my life that we would have seen that kind of unemployment. And I'm getting old now, like Andrew Den online here. So I have to, but the bottom line being that what you just described a while ago, Julian, when I go into a country like we just went in and announced where Sandals is going into Curacao or into St. Vincent, I invite the media into a room, I invite the political directorate on both sides of the political divide, and I give them a presentation on what we are going to do for employment, for marketing, for training and development, for local consumption, for community outreach. And literally 90+% of the questions that they all come into that room thinking they're going to ask, we answer in a commitment of what it is that we're going to do. And I think when you talk about policy, Nicola, and I know that we have had these conversations, John, myself, etc. The tourism industry is getting to a stage today where you can participate on many different levels. In the big player world, it's become a big industry. It's become a very capital intense industry to build these big hotels. But there is so much of a future. If you're going to do a Airbnb or a smaller hotel, or if you're going to try and get into the medium-sized space. But in the supply chain side, I think Jamaica's policy needs to do a better job for inclusion of the Jamaican entrepreneurial class and for those who want to get in there. Meaning, I actually believe that there are pieces of the industry that there should be barriers to entry for foreign investment because the capital is here in Jamaica, the entrepreneurial class is here in Jamaica. And I think if you don't ask of someone, then it is unlikely because it's inconvenient, right? If someone's purchasing department is in Mallorca, and they have 100 hotels around the world, they're not so concerned for the farmer in Jamaica the way that, my hotels use 96% of our produce is grown locally, picked within 24 hours, farm to table. But it takes effort. And I think that we can bridge a huge gap. So that doesn't even get to COVID. That's just how things should be because, it's 2019, 2020. Walking out of COVID, this has become the digital world. The digital world to get to a place of experience, right? So everything has gone touchless in the airport. I'll never build a front desk again. There's no need for a front desk unless it's, it's almost like a guest services reception. Menus have gone on to QR codes.
Yeah.
And, delivery service companies are in there. Medical companies that come to you are going to form out of this. I mean, everything that's everything that you're doing in your day-to-day life or any inconvenience will become an opportunity for the new divisions of linkages. But linkages today looks at health and wellness, it looks at gastronomy, it looks at entertainment, it looks at manufacturing, it looks at agriculture, shopping. And where we talk about policy, if you take shopping as an example, unless we change policy for shops to be internationally competitive, they will never be an industry here. The industry has got to be as competitive as when the cruise ship leaves from here and goes to Grand Cayman. That if they know, because the influence of the cruise ship and the onboard staff, they know that it's not duty free here, but it is there, or the duty free bandwidth here is at a level, it'll never be an industry. And in many ways, it's why it hasn't become an industry to the international market. And I was really glad to hear Julian call us an export, because tourism is an export industry. The fact that people are arriving here in Jamaica, it is an export. Some would call it a reverse export. And it's hard to deny the facts. 50% of our foreign exchange, 350,000 employees, and that foreign exchange it comes off of the cruise ship or out of our hotel into a taxi man's back pocket and into the banking system in a total of 24 hours. And look around your room that you're all in right now. Show me something that didn't start with foreign exchange. Nails, lumber, steel, the plastic for the water bottle that Wisynco or any company blows. Foreign exchange is a cornerstone. And I think it is lost in many instances on Jamaica at large, because it's been so long that we haven't had foreign exchange shortages. What would happen to Jamaica if we never had that foreign exchange? And remittances we know are up, and that's fantastic that the diaspora have done well for us. But remittance, that is not a long-term solution. That's not a sustainable solution. I do not believe that remittances will continue to be up 30 to 40% on an ongoing basis, because if they were, or they could, they would have been that way in years gone by. So tourism, and we should never think of tourism as either or. Tourism is the industry that wants to gel and mesh with everyone, and we should grow them all. Food and beverage services, manufacturing, the lot of it. Exactly.
So as you touch a little bit on the transformation in terms of innovation and digital side of things, John, you want to give us a little final thoughts in terms of how the future would look of tourism, especially from the attractions, services point of view and the whole island experience?
From a digital perspective? Yes. Well, what is taking place in the attractions now, which I don't think is any different from what Adam is describing with the hotels, is that you have touchless entry, touchless. The customers are walking through now. They can be pre-processed before they come in, so they walk right through. Same sort of thing, the QR codes for menus and activities and even purchasing items in the site. Digital brochures is now the thing. People don't want to be touching paper that somebody else might have touched before. No different than a menu. And like that, what we're finding is that this is now an expectation that people are having. And when I say that, it's not that they're expecting it in an attraction, but what they are not expecting is to be exposed to something that they feel could give them COVID. But from another perspective, it's such an improvement in the experience. I don't think they're ever going to go turn back. They're going to walk back going forward. One thing I wanted to just point out, because in a lot of what Julian is saying and Adam as well, as far as the inclusiveness, one of the bugbears has been and this is for both the cruise and for the hotel, is there are people that come to the island and want that freelance experience, that experience of walking through the streets and enjoying just being in the island. And that's an area of great opportunity, those managed spaces, and being able to really build the capacity of people in that area to be able to add value as opposed to taking away the value, will only improve the overall experience. And that is an area that Adam and I have been in discussions about as to how we can achieve that. And that's going to take, again, building that alignment. And it takes a collaborative approach between government and private sector, and a certain level of confidence that it's going to take place, because it needs investment in the aesthetics of the areas, and really a proper program of getting people that are in that space and training them to become a part of the solution.
Yes. But not to cut you down, but I do think we started along that road already. The building out of community tourism, the how we were doing linkages in terms of the different experiences across the island. But now with the reset and with what's happened and how we look at post-COVID, I think there is an opportunity for, yes, micro, small, and medium. I know we have two large players on the call with us today, but that's not meaning that the opportunities that we're talking about today does not trickle and spread throughout, no matter what size organization you are. And there are a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities that are being presented with this COVID experience, a lot in the digital space, but also just in personalized, curated tours. There's people want to have that more personalized experience. So there are persons who have already started doing, very, very high-end, as Adam would say, is bespoke tours for that high-end market. But then you can have other things that are really customized to various experiences where people want to go out across Jamaica, but don't want to necessarily be in a large group. They may want to be in a smaller group. And so that opens up opportunities for, very creative entrepreneurs to provide solutions to that demand. So I definitely think that the opportunities exist at the big scale, large properties, large attractions, large players, but really does exist at all levels within the industry, and also the suppliers to the industry, because we are also seeing more curation of really niche and specialized product that persons are bringing to the table to satisfy that new consumer that is coming to us. Well, I think we're just up onto the Q&A, and I'm just going to ask persons again, as we said before, if you have any questions, to please raise your hand so that you can be acknowledged, and then we will go into the questions and ask our panelists to answer as best they can. So we'll see if we have any immediate questions at this time.
Hello?
Diana, go ahead. This is a real community tourism lady here. So Diana, please. Question? Diana? Okay, are you muted? All right, let's move on. Andre Gooden. Andre, how are you, my friend? You have a question for us?
I'm here now.
Yes,
sorry.
I do.
Dana, just 1 second. I started letting somebody else go before you, so I'll come back to you. Okay. Andre, go ahead.
Thank you. What is the status of the global cruise ship industry now? I mean, and in public, we're hearing that basically nothing is happening, but in our negotiations back and forth, what is the prospect for 2021 in that regard?
John, you want to give a quick recap?
Yeah. Hi, Andre. There's no crystal ball with it. It's largely dictated by the CDC. CDC has given what I think the cruise industry almost refers to as a gauntlet on which to start. So they have been given permission to start, but they've been told that they have to start in these different phases. It starts with 1 week at the port itself with volunteers, and then they're testing people. Then it goes into another. So it's these phased steps before they're reopened to allowed to go to an open destination like Jamaica, for instance. Jamaica has been able to provide them with the required protocols that I think would meet the will meet what the demands are. At this point, what I can tell you is it would look like somewhere around April to June would be a time in which they should be able to go to the destinations like Jamaica, which are not private islands.
Okay, thanks for that, John. Dana, you were coming back to you, no? Dana? Seems I've lost her. Okay. Andre, you had another question? Okay, we have
is Q4 optimism include cruise shipping? Adam had a perspective on Q4 as being pivotal and likely to be improved. I was wondering if that includes
Q4 2020 or 2021?
21.
Yeah.
Most of what I'm describing is land-based tourism. The cruise shipping, as John described, right? So the cruise ships are going to start with the Great Bahama Bank. Each of the main 5 cruise lines have private islands in the Bahamas. They're likely to go there first. Then they're proximity to short cruises, 3-day cruises, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos. And then as you come down through the Windward passage between Dominican Republic and Cuba, there's Jamaica, and then the Cayman Islands, Cozumel. That's kind of the Northern Caribbean. So I think John is right. I think it's anyone's guess, though, because they're being so heavily regulated by the CDC.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they step out, you put 4,000 people. If you went anywhere in the world today and tested 4,000 people, just about anywhere on the planet, sooner or later you're going to find 1 or 2 infected persons. And even if they weren't infected when you tested them, they could be infectious several days later. So the cruise ships have a real mountain to climb to recover, but all of us are hopeful. The cruise ships are my competitors, but in this world that we're living in, it doesn't suit anyone to not cooperate and work together. And I sincerely hope that the cruise ships are able to come back in that April to June. But there is a very strong likelihood that maybe we don't see them until the back end of the summer for things that we can't foresee today.
At this moment.
But land-based tourism is a bit clearer, and it's a bit simpler to move people, and hence why it's gone first.
Excellent. Nolly, I see you have your hands up. How are you? Go ahead for me.
I was just going to ask, has the demographic of the visitors during the pandemic changed? And do we expect that to change even more next year?
Yes, sir. It's changed the Republicans. We're seeing
oh boy.
We're seeing more Republicans than we've ever seen in travel. And I know that's not a very popular thing to say, but it is a factual thing to say.
All right.
But we've seen a little less on the boomer generation, but sincerely, the boomer generation are still traveling, heavily seeing people in the honeymoon segment, because they're young and they're strong and they're not as fearful, but they also want to get on with their life. They just got married and they're honeymooning, or they're coming here to get married. So you see it a little bit less on the boomer generation, but other generations are moving on demographics. But I think families
is behind a little bit,
right?
Just cost to travel with children at this time.
Incremental costs, right? So PCR testing for those and whatnot, and I think parents are also being a little bit more cautious right now with their kids. A lot of people from the red states come into the Caribbean, not just Jamaica. Interesting.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Nicola?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm traveling in a car. That's why it's been in and out. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say that we have everything set for the lifestyle experience to our organization, Country Style Community Tourism Network. And we've been highly recognized, and we've won awards and so on. So all they have to do is to link with us, and we can design vacations with the community lifestyle, whether it be at Sandals or wherever. It can happen. And we have had support from the Sandals Foundation.
Yes.
About. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have people who are involved. We have a large network, And
Correct.
we have our board members. So let's just say that it is now time to make that link, and let's move the agenda forward.
Great.
Okay?
Thanks, Daniel. Thank you. Okay, so we have Razio next. Razio, your question, please.
Good day, everyone. The question I have is, how can we be more efficient and effective through the use of research and development to help stabilize our business growth despite the pandemic in the sector?
Okay, who wants to take that?
Well, from a research point of view, I would say that there's a new norm. I mean, Adam says that, you know, they're largely Republicans, and they are. But there's a new set of travelers, and the more we can get our real data on what their wants are, what they're looking for, and understand them and make sure that we are pulling all of our assets together to add value and to appeal to them, it's going to be that much better for us and that much quicker recovery.
And I think just to add to what John is saying, it's a great question because whereas you're typically looking at trends, trailing, historical, 12 months, 18 months, 36 months, it's not clear and it's not obvious to the business place today what the consumer is truly looking for. We know that people want to be safe, generally speaking, but I think we're going to have to use focus groups and research questionnaires and good old-fashioned sitting down with a clipboard and talking to customers more now in a more dynamic and real-time way than we've ever had before, meaning on a week-to-week basis, what are we seeing, what are we hearing, because things are changing. But if you look back, there was a period of time that by the hour things were changing, and then it turned into by the day, and then it turned into by the week, and then now it's kind of like month to month. You get a change here, but when we were drafting Jamaica's protocols, Nicola, John, the GHTA team working with the Ministry of Tourism, etc. First draft was April 23rd. It was like hour by hour, things were changing. I mean, we would Zoom 6, 7, 8 times a day as an industry.
Oh, yes.
As I know, my colleague hotel, Philip Hoffa, is online from Iberia Star, Couples Resorts online. I mean, when I tell you that the industry pulled together, everybody pulled together, and we still are pulling and working together. And then we've been joined now by industry at large and Julian and the banking sector. And it's been a really beautiful thing to watch, to be honest.
Yes. And just to add that, we definitely need to look at all the research that is currently being done. And we do that. We try to pull on data that comes from some of the international partners like the WTCC and others. All right, so we're going over to Dr. Colette Smith. And then we have Lichim Simaj and then Jason Hensel in that order.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Nicola. First of all, I want to commend the tourism linkages team, Adam and the entire team, for a fabulous job in terms of the protocols and all of that Mr. Reader has outlined in terms of what we're doing in terms of COVID. Now, my question to you is, Barbados has implemented a very creative policy for long-stay visitors. Are we looking across the Caribbean to see how we can benefit from that? Particularly as you look across the United States and the UK, you see a lot of organizations implementing work from home policies. So people now, once they have access to a good internet connection, they can pretty much work from anywhere in the world. How are we capitalizing on that?
Probably not enough. I don't see any negative to what Barbados implemented. I know we have considered it, meaning visitors coming here, renting a home, paying in US dollars, going to the supermarket, buying products, becoming a part of our society is a great stopgap. And I think it hasn't taken off. It's a great PR message too. It's not booming. The world is not going to Barbados to lock away. It's not an inexpensive thing. It really becomes something for those who are able to afford it. But I don't think there's much negative to it from an economic earnings point of view.
And we have a few hotels like ours. Well, Jamaica Pegasus has it. I know Half Moon has it. And I think Jason on the South Coast some of us have launched workation packages. So there is some traction for it. As Adam said, maybe more of us should look at it as a pivot. but definitely there's opportunity. And I do know that there are a lot of Jamaicans overseas who are looking at those opportunities, not only to work from a hotel, but to work from, a home, renting a villa or an apartment. So definitely that's something we need to push a little bit more. So
the country didn't put a policy in on Nicholas yet, right?
No, the country doesn't have a policy, but I know industry has individual properties and have gone after that market.
Probably something we should put back on the agenda.
Something that we have discussed before, but it hasn't been put in place officially, no.
Put it back on the agenda.
Definitely. Okay, Leah Kim, your turn.
My question is similar to the last question. The recent data shows that persons who are educated above the college degree level, over 65% of them can work from home and will choose to work from home. And then I extrapolate, if you can work from home, you can work from anywhere.
Correct.
Once you have internet access. So I do believe that that potential market is much larger, clearly more educated and a higher earning power and spending power. But I don't expect the big players with the big hundreds and thousands of rooms to fill would be interested in it. I figure the boutique hotels and the villas will see this as a long-term process. I even see a reverse component, and there are many Jamaicans abroad. In fact, I have some relatives who are professionals abroad who are currently planning that working from home will mean that they'll work from Jamaica.
Correct.
They'll come here and spend most of their time here. They still have their jobs where they are, but just the climate. And so I do believe that that's an incredible market that we, first of all, the nation has to give the signal. Barbados give a clear signal, straight up. I saw Jason, Treasure Beach jumped on it quickly, and then Pegasus jumped. But I don't think as a nation we have really looked at that. But I see that it's quite lucrative, people with high spending power, and even myself, my company is totally virtual now. And what I tell myself, if I can work from home at least one day a week, I go somewhere in Jamaica. All I need is internet access and I can do my work. And if I have no internet, I use my cell phone as a hotspot and get my work done. So I don't think we should overlook this segment because it's going to grow stronger and stronger. The persons were never going to go back to an office.
Yes, that is true. You do have that happening for some companies. Jason, you're up next.
Thanks. And I really want to commend everyone on the panel and the PSOJ for putting this together. The long stays is something we've been lobbying for probably about 3 months. So I really think it should be put back on the agenda for sure. Julian, this question is to you. I'm just looking at the linkages and how important that is, and particularly with agro-tourism. Most of our farmers, what they really need is access to affordable and dependable irrigation water, right? If we had that, I just think that our agriculture would soar, because when you look at what our farmers are doing with the little water that they have now, and the unreliable and high cost of water, I just wonder what the impact on the national budget is going to be in terms of just the ability to put large infrastructure projects like improving irrigation to our farmers on the agenda in light of everything that is happening now.
So Jason, I don't know why you joined the two. You're speaking from the breadbasket, right? You don't have what. These are some of these areas where I think we have a real opportunity to right size our economy overall. And I do not see that it needs to necessarily have a meaningful impact on the budget of the government. The bottom line is that if there is a level of surety with regards to the ability of people to pay the bills, the water bills, when they come, then, and that surety comes from the result, as a result of the fact that we know that to the extent that they use water and they have product to sell, that there's a market for them to sell into. Then all of a sudden, putting infrastructure in place becomes something that the private sector can look at and make bankable. It's not a stretch. We at the current moment as a country have embarked and have had a certain level of success with regard to private sector PPPs with the government and stepping out there and providing infrastructure and funding that, whether through debt or through equity. We're in the ideal place to look upon the private sector as being a true solution to these sorts of challenges that we have for key industries such as farming. So I don't see there to be much of an impact necessary on the budgets of the government. But I do believe that there's a greater level of transparency and assurance that we need to see within the financial sector, that the demand for the products if produced exists, and that can help feed not only the infrastructure that is required, such as the piping and all of the rest of the water infrastructure, the water infrastructure related to water will be required for St. Elizabeth, but all of the machinery and all the rest that would of course make this work that much more efficiently done. All of that can easily occur on the back of clear commitments and clear linkages with the tourism sector, which by far is the largest purchaser of product that the country would have.
Okay. And the second part of my question would be, seeing that there, most persons have agreed that it's looking like about a 50% fall in occupancy over the 2021 period. In your mind, from a banking sector, Julian, how vulnerable or how protected do you think the majority of our properties are? I know that's probably a pretty vague open-ended question, but in your mind, just from a financial point of view, do you think that 80-85% of our properties will be able to weather that storm of a 50% occupancy for the next 12 months?
I wouldn't want to hazard a guess, especially not in the company that we're in. We have experts, both from the association and from the individual segments, here on the call, and they would be able to give a better color on who can weather and who would, of course, find it more challenging to weather 50% occupancy.
Yeah. Okay.
I think to just go on to your point, Jason, I don't know if Adam or John wants to comment on it, but generally speaking, as we know, that's going to be extremely difficult. It's going to require creativity. It's going to require maybe, as I said, pivoting into other elements and that you may not have normally done in your regular course of business. Looking at other, we've been getting a lot of support from the local staycation program, and many of our hoteliers have used their restaurants and started to do curbside pickups and takeouts, and it's going to require creativity, because 50% is not going to get you to break even in a lot of cases, much less profitability. So I don't know if Adam or John wants to comment.
Jason, good to hear about it. I don't think there's a magic formula here. Different companies were at different stages of their life cycle, different stages of the financing. Some were highly leveraged. I think many companies that have been highly leveraged have been caught. But I would like to believe that there is a deep respect and dialogue, and I've felt it myself, between the banking sector and tourism. The difference is here is that, unlike the last economic downturn and some of what took place in the 1990s and in other periods of our time that predated me and some of us, the fundamentals here are very, very different. This is not something that happened as a result of a lack of fiscal discipline. This is a health crisis that turned economic crisis, that has turned social crisis. So I think we all find ourselves in a position where we are having to use the strength of our balance sheets to keep things going. We're having to cut costs. We have incremental costs. We have new costs. We can't put staff in regular staff transportation. We're having to transport our customers in a bus that used to hold, a 28-seater, 26-seater coaster. We can only put 10 people in there now, or 14 people in there. We have PPE. We have more chemicals. So you have lower occupancies. Generally speaking, the industry has lower ADRs, and you have higher operating expenses. You need more staff to implement the protocols. So not a pity party. It's just a reality of what we're having to endure, all of us as hoteliers and tourism operators. But I think the most important thing is that we don't keep exuding a ray of hope for a false narrative. We know the demand is there. We know people have COVID fatigue and they want to get going, and the vaccine is now here. So those who didn't want the vaccine generally tend to be those who are traveling. Those who want it will start to receive it. And the truth is, I think we have 6 more months of pain. We'll get a bit of an incremental jump in occupancy because it's the winter season. It's very, very cold all across America. You've seen the snowstorms. And something that's favorable for us is the airlines have always made good money on the air routes. Jamaica is one of them, and they have huge excess capacity. So what used to take us 6 or 8 or 12 months for flight planning, you can literally put aircraft on a route if demand is there, in 10 days. That's unprecedented. And American Airlines, JetBlue, Delta, Southwest, they have stood by our side in a way. I mean, particularly American Airlines, I have to kind of recognize them. They've been unbelievable. So you have to just keep kind of riding and do everything that you can to hold it together, knowing that better days are in sight.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, we're gonna take the final question. Only seen one raised hand. I think somebody dropped off. Dr. Colette, you're getting the last question.
Thanks. Jason and Julian mentioned a while ago something about farming. What COVID has really taught us, as we saw our ports close down, that our import dependence cannot continue. We have to ensure that we have food security. We're going to do that through pumping up the agricultural sector. I did some work for the IDB some time ago, and I found out that the IDB does provide some amount of project financing for development in certain areas, particularly in agriculture. So I'm going to call on Julian to see whether or not he and other persons within the financial sector can identify whether or not there are any IDB funds available, and perhaps work with Jason to prepare a project proposal to access those funds to ensure that our farmers can get the support they need for the irrigation of their crops.
Excellent. Jason, make sure you jump on that right away. All right, Edward, we said the last, but you're getting privilege here, my friend. So you go now.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. Good afternoon, fellas. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well.
Man.
Go ahead.
What's up, Adam?
This is a question. Yeah, hi, Adam. This is a question for all of you. In these particular pressing times, do you not think that the Jamaican financial sector should be a little bit more accommodating to tourist interest? I mean, you hear cases of big interest having been the squeeze being put on them, but shouldn't they wait a little? I mean, this is the backbone of the economy here in this country. It will come back. Tourism will come back, but if you have businesses and you're pressing them, to jump through these hoops and make the certain payments, which they can't. Occupancy, we talked about that. That's lowered. Shouldn't they be a little bit more understanding? I'm going to aim this question firstly at you, Julian. You're the banker.
Well, Al, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you, folks.
Good seeing you. Well, good hearing. We don't see any picture of you. So here's the thing. Every credit is a unique relationship, and I wouldn't want to in any way make it appear that I'm aware of any broad brush hard line being drawn by the financial sector with regard to the tourism interest. I believe that there may be specific instances, and there may be many specific instances that would lead to what may appear to be a heavy-handedness from the financial sector overall. But those are unique relationships between individual borrowers and the banks that they're borrowed from. What I can tell you as a financial sector participant, and the big picture with which I would have become involved in the tourism recovery plan, is that the financial sector sees that this industry is critical. Mm-hmm. It impacts meaningfully so many other industries that we can say the tentacles are far, reach far, but we still won't be able to tell you exactly how far they go, because they probably go significantly beyond what we will be able to easily identify as being industries impacted by tourism. So the overall health of the economy is what supports a healthy financial system. and financial sector specifically. In our own self-interest, the financial system is trying to see how it can provide support to the industry overall. Now, as I said, the individual experience of an individual borrower and their relationship with their bank is going to be unique. You know, Adam would have spoke to the fact that some may have been over-levered. The fact is that our tourism product was growing at such a pace and was projected to continue to do so. People would have made decisions such as, let me go and borrow additional monies to go and build out, you know, or do something else to go and pick up a larger component of this growing industry. And they may find themselves in a short-term facility that has come due. Without question, they're going to have a tough discussion with their banker. I wouldn't want to go and make it appear that the banking system or the financial system is not aware that the direct relationship between the health of the economy on the whole and tourism, it exists. It's a known fact. All we're trying to do at the moment, and I'll tell you what I'm doing, along with other members of the financial sector and along with consultants acting on our behalf, we're out there and we're sizing the scale of this. We're out there and we're working to ensure that we size this problem in as much granularity as we can, so that we can work towards providing a softer landing as we possibly can, not only for the tourism sector, but for all the industries that are affected by it, along with including the banking sector, which of course stands central to a lot of the activities, not only of tourism, but of course its related industries. So we're out there and we're actually doing the work, and we're spending money to do the work so we can understand this as deeply as we can, and therefore put forward solutions that address the actual issues that could support the country and the economy overall, and this sector more specifically.
Al, did that answer you? Adam, you want to comment on that question?
I mean, look, I think Julian has said it, Al, in a way that's the most compliant and the most responsible. You know, each company is going to have a different credit rating or particular situation based on leverage, etc., exposure. What I will say is that I think the government's the best and set cash that they helped with the team members who were laid off has been very helpful. The fact of the matter is that hotels are highly capital intense machines. They cost a fortune to sit empty. The lights have to be on. I mean, I tell people all the time, my AC hotel, when it never fully closed, but just sitting there without capital repayment was costing me $350,000 a month.
And that's US dollars.
US dollars, right? So it's not as though you just turn off the lights and you go to Europe on a vacation and come back when you're ready. It has got, you have all the people had redundancies that they had to make good on with staffing, a lot of tenured staffing. So the industry found itself in a position circumstantially. And again, I say most people that got caught didn't get caught because of mismanagement. They got caught because of a circumstance that none of us could see coming. And the government stepping in and helping us to offset keeping our staff with food on their table was very helpful, because my own group is in and across many industries in Jamaica, and I can tell you that whether it's quick serve or whether it's industrial or automotive, they've all had a different impact, but none of them like tourism, because tourism revenues never went to zero. In many cases, they went to negative 100. Because the cash that we use as future deposits, as working capital, customers were calling and asking for it back. So they cancel their booking. You're working with that cash. There's always a life cycle from a cash flow point of view. And then they started calling and asking back for all their money. So, it was like the perfect storm. And I would, on this, it's a touchy subject, but I do think that I would like to encourage the government to continue to support tourism. And the tourism ecosystem at large, not just tourism workers, but those who are without the opportunity until the opportunity resumes, which we've already covered will it will happen. But I think we have a few more months of a rough ride.
Thank you, Adam. All right, so we had a very good conversation, very detailed information, and I definitely want to thank our three panelists, Adam Stewart, John Byles, and Julian Mair. And I just want us to recap a little bit some of what we came out of today's episode. Deepening of linkages is clearly on the agenda and in our recovery process, particularly agriculture and manufacturing. Use of technology, innovation, and the digital space to transform the product that we are offering, and pivoting out of some of the protocols that we now have implemented and seeing how they will long-term impact the industry. The look at how MSMEs can capture some of these new markets that are coming in, these new opportunities where they can, not only for the large players, but for the smaller players, offer new and innovative products to satisfy the new traveling consumer. We also definitely focused on the issue of work from home and workation packages and how Jamaica can choose to capitalize on that even more, along with other new segments. And we also had a little bit of focus on how we should work together to unleash the Jamaican entrepreneurial might, to take advantage of the tourism recovery and to impact tourism not only directly or in of itself, but also how we can move that into the other supply chains within that focus around the industry, and in turn help to recover Jamaica and to change maybe the Jamaican landscape in terms of how we were pre-COVID, to come back bigger, better, stronger, and with a renewed focus, utilizing all the assets that Jamaica has to offer, from its people, its natural beauty, and of course, its brain power. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank all of you in the audience for engaging with us in this conversation. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors and support, JMMB Group and the IDB Invest. You can rewatch this and future episodes on the PSOJ YouTube channel and follow on the LinkedIn page for additional comment on this subject. We hope that this was a stimulating conversation and that this will continue outside of this forum as we all work together on the roadmap to recover not only tourism, but Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Good. Bye.
Thank you all. Take care.